you're going to get the attendance and feedback form, and that's also what you're going to need to do to get paid. So you need to fill out that form and to get your CPDUs. Be sure to sign up for any additional sessions that you find on our website, and also we send weekly emails on Thursdays to remind you. This is the very last new session today. We are no longer creating new sessions this summer. So at this point, everything you get will be information about repeating sessions. You are welcome to come to a session again. You will not get paid and you will not get CPDUs for attending the same session twice. Just so you're aware, we're also recording all the sessions and we're making those available as that comes up, just so that you're aware. And if you need an additional support or a thinking partner, please reach out to us. There are several colleagues at Glenbrook who are offering sessions. And then there are also the instructional technology team who is offering sessions as well. So today, what are we going to be doing? So today, here's our plan. We're going to briefly discuss research behind classroom community building. We're going to talk about strategies for teachers and students to connect. And then we're going to share strategies for peers to connect in the classroom. So what is our current reality as of Friday? We know that we're going to be e-learning. We're going to be in e-learning environment until at least October 5th, right? So that's one of those drop dead dates where they can decide and move that. But we are going to be e-learning for a while and for the beginning of the year. So we also know that the things that we normally do, Lisa and I at the very beginning was talking about, it's like opening your classroom door, but there is no door to open. A lot of us stand at the door or greet kids as they walk in by name. That's a really powerful strategy that has a lot of research behind it. That's not as easy in this e-learning environment. The 10x2 strategy, which is a great strategy to work with kids and get to know them, and kids who you feel may be struggling. You're supposed to just randomly have side conversations with kids, and that's a lot harder in this as well. So we know that there's a fear of the unknown. There's a lot that we don't know, and that we're changing a lot of our routines, and it could be changing back and forth throughout the year. So these are all the things that we know. So how can we focus on building community? And how can we do that with the time and attention that it's going to require? Because it's going to be different, and we're just going to think about things a little differently. So why? We know that positive relationships draw students into the learning. There's a great article from the American Psychological Association that's linked, and you'll receive, when you get these, you can check out that article. But it talks about how not just for little kids is it really important to build relationships, but all the way through high school, the importance of those relationships and how we can draw students into the learning with that relationship. And so we need to do that so we can ease this transition into our online environment. When you build a positive environment, you're going to minimize the feeling of threat. We know Zaretta Hammond in her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, talks about the amygdala and how the amygdala can be triggered with a feeling of threat. And if the amygdala is triggered, your brain shuts down for at least 2 hours, and learning at that point becomes near impossible. And so we need to minimize those feelings of threat to allow vulnerability and to allow learning and to create a feeling that all of us are in this together. So we know we've talked about this a lot, and so a lot of you have seen this, but we're just going to give people a brief overview of John Hattie's research and effect sizes, because this research is really powerful and can really help us anchor our lesson planning and our thinking. So Hattie, in his research, looks at effect sizes, and he has in his research said that 0.4 is 1 year's learning in 1 year's time. And anything above that is just you increasing the power of the learning. And so how can we do that? Well, it's by finding strategies that work in that zone of desired effects and using them consistently and with fidelity to the strategy and the structure. So 2 of the strategies that we're focusing on today it's obviously teacher and student relationships, but having that positive relationship is a 0.72 effect size. So that's a really positive way to improve student learning. And the other one is looking at cooperative learning at the 0.55 effect size. And so those are the two things that Caitlin and I are going to be talking about today. We are going to throw a ton of ideas at you. The community building is huge. It's a huge topic, and there's no one size fits all. Every teacher has their own style and their own way of doing things. So what we're going to do is we decided we're going to throw a ton of ideas at you. If there's something that doesn't sound good to you, just tune us out for a couple minutes and stop paying attention. We give you permission. And if there's something that does sound good, we put links, we've put extra information available for everyone. And just remember that all of these things can be taken and modified and tweaked. And we've given examples and links for everything. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is how to build a strong teacher-student relationship in your e-learning classroom. We know that this is critical. Zaretta Hammond in her research has suggested that we should spend about 70% of the beginning just working on that teacher-student relationship to really focus on lowering the threats that could happen in the classroom and providing that strong community that will then be able to really push forward in their learning. So icebreakers, those are pretty typical and common in our classrooms, and it's more of a challenge now. And so Caitlin and I were really trying to think of ways that you could do icebreakers in an e-learning environment. And there were three things that kind of stuck out to us amongst all the research that people have been providing about icebreakers for e-learning. So the first one would be a getting to know you survey. Now I know that that's pretty popular across the board. And lots of teachers do that. And this is a great strategy to get to know your students, to find out what they feel maybe they're excited about this year, to kind of get to know what they feel like their challenges for e-learning will be, and to provide you with feedback and things that you can use to kind of connect with students quickly. Another great icebreaker would be a short letter to the teacher. You know, you could have the students explain to you, if you're an elective like I am. Oh, if everybody could mute their mics, that would be fantastic. So we've got a short letter to the teacher. If you're teaching an elective like I am, why are you taking this class? Like, what inspired you to take French? You might get, there are always some really good answers to those sorts of things. Or tell me about your e-learning experience in the spring. Some students really thrived and really had a positive experience, and other students didn't. So what information can you get from the student to start to connect? And then the other idea connects to a strategy that lots and lots of teachers use at the beginning of the year to get together with students and to kind of start to get to know people. And it's the bingo game. In French we call it bravo, but it's a bingo game. But it's usually the kids getting up and walking around the room and meeting other people to fill in their squares, and then they've gotten to know a fact about everybody else in the room that is but that's not possible. That's not really a strategy that's going to work with Zoom. So then we kind of thought about it, and one way that you could use this is it's a bingo board about you, and having the students come in and fill in their name with a fact that relates to you. So these are all true about me. I do really love naps. So now my students are going to come in here and they are going to fill in their name with a fact that relates to me. I was very cognizant of the fact that I wanted to be, I wanted to be as inclusive as possible. I wanted to make sure that all of them weren't about travel, because I do love to travel, but for a lot of our students, that's not within their budgets. I wanted to make sure that it kind of went all over the board as far as sports to intellectual and so I really kind of thought through some things that just about anybody would be able to connect to in some way, shape, or form. But now I've got an instant way to have a conversation with every single kid. And we can kind of talk about, what weird things have you eaten? I've eaten horse and escargot and snake, and let's talk about that. That's crazy. Just something to start connecting and talking to students. So this is kind of how we decided to change that for the e-learning environment. The next strategy is something, it's called witness to the good. So witness to the good is a strategy. This is something that we've read about in Jim Knight's books. And what this is about building a positive classroom environment. So there are 3 stages to this classroom management idea. There's the expectations piece, so really thoroughly rolling out your expectations, which we've had a session and we will have another session about. There's this idea of witness to the good, and then there's fluent corrections. And so in witness to the good, what we're trying to do is give the students as much positive attention as possible. It's kind of like shining a flashlight on all the positive things that are happening, because students, most children, in fact, love attention, and it sometimes comes in the form of positive or negative. But the research shows that a 3-to-1 or anywhere up to a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative actually can really have a positive impact on your classroom environment and on the student themselves, and how the student perceives themselves and how they perceive you. So, but you also need to keep a couple things in mind with the witness to the good. It needs to be genuine, so you actually have to mean what you're saying. You need to be specific and direct, so it can't just be good job, but it needs to be, I love the hard work that you're doing on this assignment. It needs to be non-attributive. What that means is you shouldn't be attributing a quality to a person. So you shouldn't be saying, oh, John, you're so smart, because John in his head might say, well, I'm not smart, and will just disregard exactly what you've said. But instead, you can say, John, this number 2 was really challenging. You answered all the steps correctly. Good job. And so that's giving the same message, but in a very concrete and positive way. So one thing that we do as coaches is we can help people to kind of collect data. So this is a special ed classroom where they were working on witness to the good. And you can see that this teacher was really focusing on correction versus positive ratio. And the lines are for positive, the X's are for corrections, because we all know corrections need to be made. And that's why the ratio exists, because you can't just be positive every time in your classroom. You're going to need to remind kids of the things that aren't going so well. But basically you're looking at it as like a piggy bank, where you're storing up cash to make withdrawals. And there's so much in the piggy bank that's positive that when you make a withdrawal, it's not going to harm that relationship. So as an individual teacher, if this is something that's interesting to you in building that positive relationship, you could sit with your chart of names and kind of tally as you go. It's really helpful for seeing who am I not getting any attention to, where can I, shift some of my focus, where am I giving too much negative attention, and to kind of help yourself to start to see patterns. And also that's where an instructional coach can step in as well. Have us come into your e-learning classroom and kind of just map out everything as you're teaching. And then we can talk about what those ratios look like, and the importance of building that positive classroom environment. Another strategy that Zaretta Hammond talks about in her research is something called selective vulnerability. She refers to teachers as being a warm demander. And what a warm demander is, it is someone that has a really friendly and positive relationship with their students, and they use their relationship as leverage to demand high quality work. And so, but because you've got such a positive relationship, remember, she said 70% at the beginning of the year is working on the relationship. And so now you've got this positive relationship, and you can leverage that to push students to working even harder and giving you better quality work. She even says in her research that every student should think that you like them. It doesn't have to be true, but it should be what they think, because you want to create a social emotional stability in your classroom. And so one way that you can do this in being the warm demander is share appropriate feelings to build community. I plan on telling students at the beginning of the year that, e-learning is not where I would like to be. I mean, where I would like to be is back in a safe world where there is no virus and we could be teaching and learning together, because there's no teacher in the world that really wants to stare at the computer screen. It's the fact that there are risks involved if we're not there. And so you can share some of your fears and what you're thinking. You can also share information about your weaknesses and struggle in your content. So find ways to show students that, you weren't always like this master of your domain, but my mom keeps everything like a mini hoarder, and all of my French 1 workbooks still exist. So sometimes when the kids are struggling with like early verb conjugations, I can pull out my old workbook and be like, look, I had troubles too when I was first studying all of this, but we can move past it, and you can do great things. So using that selective vulnerability to show students and to build connections with them is another way that we can build community with our students. Finally, one of the last pieces of research that came from Stanford and Arizona State University was the idea of creating conversations around non-academic questions. So they could be questions related to your content, in the ways that, have you been to France? Where have you seen this mathematical formula in the real world? What are the applications of using this in the real world? Questions that are related to content. There are questions that build community, and I'm not going to go through those right now, but those are all linked in there. This comes from Heather Chambers, was the person that shared this with me, but it's called Fast Friends Questions, and there are 35 questions that you can use to build friendships quickly. And so these are questions that are specifically designed to build community, and they're all listed there. Surveys to check in with students to see how they're doing. I know a lot of teachers were using that in the spring when they were talking about checking in with students, seeing how they were feeling, seeing how e-learning was going, seeing if students were taking care of themselves. So there's a way to check in with students and make sure that they're socially and emotionally doing okay. And that builds community because you're able to reach out to students and say, I see what you're saying here, would you like to talk? And there were a few students in the spring who really did want to chat and wanted to check in, and we're using that as a way to reach out to the teacher in a non-intrusive kind of way. And finally, there's the idea of using these opening and closing circles, which is it's a Native American ritual that a lot of people have started to adopt to use to kind of build community and to kind of hear everyone's voice. And so, we have 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end of every class now. A closing circle, go around the virtual room and have everybody tell how they felt about the lesson today. Or have everybody go around and share one thing that they're planning on doing this weekend to keep it non-academic. But hearing from everyone so that the students have the opportunity to hear from peers, and we have the opportunity to build connections with them as well.
All right, thanks, Matt, for all that teacher-student information. Now, I'm going to share some strategies and activities that students can participate in to build strong connections with their peers. So we'll talk about some icebreakers, community activities, and team-building games that you can do during the first week of school. So one way for students to develop a connection with peers in your classroom is by asking them to interview each other. You can find lots of different interview questions online, or you could even create your own interview questions for the students to ask. You could even actually ask students to make their own interview questions that they'll use when talking with their peers as well. So the questions can be specifically just about the student, just to get to know them and their overall person, or the questions could really be connected to your class to see if any of them have interest in your content area or discipline. So here are some steps to facilitating a successful interview with students on Zoom. So first, you as the teacher would present the interview directions and expectations during the whole group Zoom. Then you would create breakout rooms with 2 students in each. It would probably be easy to do the random automatic way, but we also know there is a manual option in Zoom. If you wanted to pair specific students up, you could do that on the fly. And then students will interview each other using a Google Doc. So like I said, there's many ways to get those questions, but in any case, have everyone be using the same Google Doc so they know what to be asking. And be sure that all of the kids open up that Google Doc before they head into the breakout room so that A, they don't waste any time when they're in there trying to find the right document, and B, they'll just really be ready to ask the questions and there won't be any confusion and you won't be getting the ask for help notification from too many people. And then finally, just a note, Don't rely on, as the host, that broadcast feature. So like, if many of you have been in breakout rooms, you might have seen a message that was broadcast to all of you that just says like 5 minutes left with your group. Don't rely on pasting these questions inside that broadcast, because with Zoom, there's actually a character limit to the broadcasting of messages to breakout groups. So if you had 10 questions, there's a high chance that most of those wouldn't fit and you'd be struggling. So kind of go the Google Doc route. It's easier. All the kids could have access to it. It could be posted on your Google Classroom, which would be a nice way to organize it. So once all the students interview each other in their breakout groups, you can have them all come back to the main room, and each student could share out like one fact that they learned about their peer with the whole group. So that way everyone can hear a little bit about their peers that they didn't get to interview. So everything A to Z is this fun icebreaker that students can do to build rapport and sort of team building skills with each other. The goal of this activity is for each group to find as many physical items or Google search items in a 5-minute time frame. So the students will need to work together as a team to accomplish this goal in a breakout group. So here are the directions for this activity. So you'll put students into their breakout groups, again with that Google Doc list. So the list will be items from A to Z. And as I mentioned, you could ask them to search for physical items that they would show on their camera in their home, or you could have them do a Google image search that they would share on their screen that way too. Then you'll have students kind of looking for either random things, or you could even make your A to Z list items that are connected to your course content if it's relevant, which could be fun. And again, just make sure that all students have that Google Doc open prior to joining the breakout so that no time is wasted and that everyone is on the same page once they're joining. When they're actually searching for the items, you'll advise them to divide up the list, take the best strategy to finding as many items as possible in that 5-minute time frame. And just so you know, with Zoom, you can add a timer in the corner so that everyone in their breakout group can see how many minutes are passing and what they have left. And then make sure that each team assigns a recorder so that they have someone who will be able to type and account for the number of items they found once they get back to the whole group. And they can put that in the chat when the breakout is closed. So some key considerations for this activity. So each team should definitely have that recorder to make sure they'll type in. And then also make sure that when you have students looking at these lists, that you're looking at it from different angles so that you're not creating a list that maybe is not as equitable. Try to think of items that would be easily accessible, and if not, then maybe go the Google image route instead of the physical item route, just to make sure it's an equitable and fair activity for everyone. So Team Trivia Icebreaker, this is one of my personal favorites. It's really fun to do trivia on Zoom, and it's a great way for kids to get to know each other at the start of a school year. So here's a good way to sort of format trivia on Zoom. So first, in the whole group, you would review the game directions and expectations, and then students would be put into random breakout groups. Again, you could choose manual if that would work better for you. And once the students join their breakout rooms, they need to know to immediately pick a recorder, because that's going to be the person who's going to be filling out their answers as they go along. So you can give students a variety of trivia questions. Again, very easy to Google that. Again, it could be content specific if you wanted them to be all about science. That might be fun. Or it could be a total random mix. Make sure that you limit the time in order for them to hopefully use their brains instead of cheating with Google. So if you do limit the time, it is a better likelihood that they'll just try to come up with their answers instead of relying on Google or something else that we don't want them to. And then what the recorder will do is they'll have a Google form with all of the questions, and they'll type in the answers as the students are going along. And they'll have to submit that form before the breakout closes and they're back into the main room. So some key considerations is for sure making a Google form ahead of time and sharing it out with everyone. So that way, first of all, everyone can see the questions as they're going along if they have it pulled up. And then the recorder will be the only one typing it so that you're not getting 25 Google Forms. You're just getting a few from the teams. And then, of course, emphasizing the idea that they shouldn't be using Google to get their answers. And while it is a game just sort of based on trust, which is something fun that they can do to get to know peers and experience a little bit of fun competition with each other. If you wanted, you could also make this team trivia a low pressure pre-assessment, nothing that would be graded, but just if you have some questions that you want to see if they know the answers to, it might be fun for them to recall prior knowledge, maybe from a class they already took that you would build on in your new course or your discipline as well. So it's your turn to be the student. We're going to do a quick round of trivia together on Zoom so you can kind of see what it would be like for the students to experience this. So you're going to be put into breakout groups randomly. And then Matt is sharing with you this link right here to your Google form. So again, choose a recorder who will be the only one sending in that response. Again, if you don't want your students to cheat, don't cheat yourself. Please don't Google. Try your best. And these are going to be your questions for trivia. First one is, what school building is the oldest in District 225? And then, which pop rock musician grew up in Glenview and attended Glenbrook South in the early 2000s? And then, what fist did Judd Nelson raise while standing on the GBN football field at the end of the Breakfast Club? So you are all going to go into your breakout rooms. You're going to have 3 minutes to pick your recorder, answer your questions, and submit your Google Doc, and then we'll all come back and I'll share out your answers.
This is going way faster than I thought it would.
Yes, I was just going to say that. But we have our breakout.
We're fine. But I was just like, I really thought that this was going to be.
Yeah, when I looked at the time, like on your last slide, I was like, oh. But that's okay. This is a little longer, so.
Yeah.
And then if we have time when they come back from the breakout group, share out with everyone.
Or if people leave 5 minutes early, people leave 5 minutes early.
Great point.
That's kind of where I'm at with all this.
Yeah.
Are you going to look at the results or do you want me to? Just so we can like, ha ha ha.
Oh, will you look and then I'll read the answers?
Yeah, and then I'll just tell you.
Because I don't know, I guess I forgot. I wasn't going to like look because I'm like, there's so many, but.
But it gives you this insight thing, which tells us like, what's the, yeah.
Most popular.
Yeah, and like what's the average? The 2.7 is the class average.
Got it. Okay.
2.4. $45 seconds.
Okay, sounds good.
Sharon here.
Yes, she good thing because someone asked about recordings and I thought we still weren't allowed to record sessions, but I guess we will have some ability.
Okay. I know.
Yeah, me neither. So I was like, no, we can't.
All right. The class average is a 2.3.
Okay. Not bad.
No.
For random GBS and GBN trivia.
Exactly. Okay. No, everyone will be back in 10 seconds.
Okay.
Everyone's back.
All right. I hope you had fun with your group. So I'm sure you're curious about the answers here. For the first question, GBN is officially the oldest physical building. It was built in 1953. And then the pop rock musician who attended in the early 2000s is Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy. And then lastly, Judd Nelson raised his right hand on the GBN football field. So Matt, you got the Google form responses from all the teams. Can you tell us a little bit about, so as the teacher, you can kind of see what students answered and kind of how successfully or not successful they were?
Yeah, so as we get responses, you can see I get the average median, so a 2.25 average, how many groups got everything right, how many groups got one wrong, team names, and then I can also see which answer was the most challenging. Perfect. So I'm able to go through and kind of like look at all of that and see, and then you should have been told immediately what your right and wrong answers were as well. So instant feedback for you as well.
Yeah, good way for formative. So anyways, we just wanted to have you run through this activity because we thought it would be fun and we thought it might be nice to take the student perspective for one of these icebreakers and activities. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Two Truths and a Lie. It's really a common game that students probably have already played in school or camp or something else before. It's a simple way to learn just a little bit about another person. It also can be a great activity that you could do in two different settings, either a breakout room, or if you have a smaller class section, you could do it as a whole group as well. So to format this on Zoom, you'll first tell students what breakout room, or if you're going to do it in the whole class, so give them that information. And then everyone will take turns typing their 3 sentences, 2 of them are true and 1 is a lie, into the chat. So make sure that students type it all together so that they can share. You could also do this on a shared Google Doc if that works better for you. You could have them make a Google slide. There's a lot of different ways they could share their 2 truths and a lie. Something they could maybe do an asynchronous and then bring it to the synchronous session, whatever works best for you. And then all of the students will take turns guessing which is the lie for each of the peers that they're working with. So some considerations when you do this activity during e-learning. Make sure if you're breaking kids into groups, you assign a facilitator to kind of help them stay on task. And before they create their 3 sentences, make sure to remind students about expected and appropriate topics because we know some students might be tempted to do otherwise. And then don't forget, if you have students in breakout rooms, you can randomly pop in just to monitor them, but also to learn some fun facts about their personalities or their experiences. So 4 Corners is a pretty common classroom activity that can be adapted for e-learning. So 4 Corners is a debate that requires students to take their position on a specific statement. So whether they strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree, students will pick their stance by standing in a particular corner of the room when we're in an in-person setting. So this is actually a great activity to get students involved and have a discussion during e-learning and during Zoom. You can use it as a warm-up activity to introduce a new topic, or it could be even a follow-up activity for students to sort of apply their learning to some of the new content that you shared that day. Again, like Matt and I said, we've linked a lot of these slides with information. So at the top here, I linked just a copy of the template I used for the Pear Deck that you'll see in a minute. So if you get that email later today and you want to see the Pear Deck slide, it is linked there for you. So here's the steps to creating 4 Corners on Pear Deck. So first you'll read the statement and ask students to take a position on it. And then you can think about having students or having statements that are either course specific or just non-academic statements that are just more fun facts or just get to know you type of questions. And then the way that students will take their position is by marking the box that they agree with using a login from Pear Deck on their phone. So they'll have their computer up watching you live, and they'll also have their phone to type in their name, and then they put their marker, and I'll show you that in a minute. Once you're done with each statement, or at the very end, you could put students in a whole group discussion or breakout groups after they've gone through some variety of statements. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you what this would look like on Pear Deck and Zoom. So this is just an example slide that I made. And you can edit all of the Pear Deck slides. So like that bolded title up there that says summer, that was something that I edited and made my own sentence. And then I typed in my own statements in all 4 of those boxes. It's all editable. So during your synchronous session, what you would do is you would share your screen because you'd be the host. And then you'd ask students to join peardeck.com. And then on your screen, you'll have a little password that everyone will type in on their phone. And then the session will become live. So once all of your students are logged in, you'll be able to show them this 4 corners game on your screen. And then I'll show you in this next slide what it could look like when students respond. So this slide just shows if 2 students participated in your class. So for simplicity, we went with 2. So what you would do is you would read the statement out loud. Summer is the best. You strongly agree. Go through all the options. And then students would hit the box on their phone that they most agree with. And then it wouldn't be visible to anyone until you as the teacher click show responses at the bottom of your Pear Deck. Then this slide will pop up with the different dots in all of the different boxes. So now students will be able to see what the whole class did and how they responded. You could draw a check mark. I chose circles. There's different ways for you to note in that box. So from here, you could do a few things. Again, you could just have a whole group discussion as a class about some of their stances, why they chose it, have a little debate, or you could make specific breakout rooms. So as you see, Matt and I just added this A, B, C, and D next to the response choices. I know some of us know that if you drag your cursor over to your picture, you can change your name, what kind of that login is. So mine just says GB Instructional Coaches right now because I'm in the coaching account. But I could type in A, Caitlin, so that when you put students in breakout groups, you could do homogeneous groups or heterogeneous groups based on their responses. So what would happen is Zoom just alphabetizes all of the student names. So if everyone went in and put their answer next to their name, you could do really specific breakout groups based on those answers. If that's not important to you, you can completely go the random route, and that would work just fine as well. But it's another way, especially if you're asking some more academic statements or opinion statements about your course content, to have students interacting in those small breakout groups. This is likely a familiar activity. A lot of students have probably experienced Pear Deck in the last few years, so it could be an engaging way to just get to know each other at the start of the semester, or to sort of play with some content early on. So the most recent photo challenge is just a quick way for students to share something about themselves with a small group of peers. And really, the directions are fairly simple. You'll just ask students to look through the last 10 photos on their camera roll, and they'll just pick one that they'll want to share out with the whole class or a breakout group with peers. And then if you assign breakout groups, it's probably easiest just to go random, especially at the first week, and you'll have all students share the photo. So some things to consider for this activity is reminding students, again, making sure they pick expected and appropriate photos, of course, limiting just to 1 photo per student to make it a quick activity. And then if you wanted to help students sort of have ways to discuss it, you could give them conversation questions that could guide them to go through each person and ask them a question about what was on or what the photo was and get some information about that peer. So again, if you have students in breakout groups, they can click that Ask for Help button if there's any questions or they need support, but it is a good way for them to sort of break out on their own and get to know each other. So theme days, It's a fun way for students to sort of establish a stronger sense of community and belonging with their new peers in your classroom at the start of the school year. So you could assign different days of the week or one day a week to be a specific theme. I listed a variety of themes here. There's tons of ideas online. You could even do just more of the basic wear your school spirit colors or school gear. You could go a little more in depth and find a theme that's sort of content specific if it would be something that everyone would have access to. I think just the most important consideration when planning out a theme day is making sure that it's something equitable so all students can participate. And another sort of benefit of doing this is that if students participate in a theme day and it's obviously held during your synchronous session, students might be more likely to turn their cameras on and to show off their theme or to show that they're participating as a whole class. So that's sort of one way to increase students' comfort with the camera and seeing peers' interest in those early synchronous sessions at the start of the school year. There's also another way you could have students connect with each other and this theme that's outside of the synchronous session, or that could be incorporated in the synchronous session. For technology, you could use Google Drawings, which we linked at the top of the slide here. So if you're not familiar with Google Drawings, it's a way to show students a visual of their class community theme, like the example that we have up on our slide right now. We know we don't want 25 kids emailing us their pictures because that's going to be too much work and time consuming for us. So if you as the teacher shared a class Google Drawing with them, everyone could individually post their photo on that box. And then you as the teacher can rearrange the pictures, add text, change the background color, and then you can save it as a JPEG and share it out with kids the next day, post on your Google Classroom, comment on it later. So again, if you'd like more information about how to use Google Drawings for this type of collage or theme day, it's linked here and you'll get that in your emails after our session today. So Matt and I just wanted to recognize, we know this was a lot of information and a ton of activities in a short period of time. We were well aware of that. We really felt like we didn't want to cut out activities or information because we knew that some of them would appeal to different groups of people, and we wanted just to give you as many ideas as possible. And especially at the start of the year, we have done a lot of research on the sense of belonging and developing community, and it is really important to take even more time to develop that, not just with you and the student, but also peer to peer. So we want to give you tons of ideas to take, borrow, adapt, whatever works best for you. So we thought this would be a good time to kind of brainstorm with another group of people in our chat today, or our Zoom today. So we obviously provided tons of different ideas, so you can maybe talk about what would work for your classroom or where you saw ways to adapt it to make it work for your classroom. But also we would love for you to take some time to share any other strategies, ideas, icebreakers, games that we didn't present on that also would be good for that community building and that sense of belonging, and some things that you could do during that first week or two of school. So